Hey everyone, I'm Diana Davison, advocate for the falsely accused and wrongfully convicted. Now, I've been in Toronto for the last 2 weeks, but there's been a lot going on over the last month. I want to look at a sideshow for the moment, a bit of a carnival escapade. One of the problems with so-called Me Too stories is how they've been handled by the media. In Canada, one of the biggest libel cases is currently underway for the ousting of Patrick Brown, expected next Premier of the province of Ontario before a rush broadcast of sexual allegations by CTV. Patrick Brown is seeking over $8 million in damages, and I'm wagering is likely to win. The sideshow here is a self-proclaimed media watchdog named Jesse Brown and his podcast, clumsily named Canadaland. Kind of like calling yourself Country Place. Anyway, Jesse and his woke haven have managed to hump the dog on 3 stories over the last month or so, and it's getting kind of too crazy to ignore. Item number 1. July 7th, when CTV responded to Patrick Brown's lawsuit, they included a slew of accusations against Patrick, using first names here to separate the Browns, which were unprintable in the news. CTV said, "Oh yeah, you think we're irresponsible? Here are a bunch of things we didn't publish because we knew it would be libelous." I like to call this backdoor publishing, where a story that would be defamatory can be published in a legal document which is protected from libel suits. So what does Canadaland do? They jump on that and print all the known libelous allegations. To make matters worse, one of these allegations can be easily shown to be false with a 5-minute Google search. So, according to CTV, Travis Danraj from CP24, connected to the investigation, and a named defendant in the lawsuit, apparently didn't bother to spend 5 minutes investigating a bogus tip that Patrick Brown had been disciplined through a complaint to an organization called the BOIE. Don't worry what that means, just know that the BOIE announced in 2016 that 0 cases had been processed. That was over a year after Patrick Brown had left Parliament Hill, but instead of doing a 5-minute Google search, no, Travis Danraj kept this allegation in the back of his mind for months. And Canadaland, the media watchdog who apparently doesn't know how to Google either, decided to amplify this complete nonsense. Now, additionally, given Jesse Brown's shifted identity from media critic to protector of all accusers everywhere, they completely failed to report the real social justice story. That when one of the women who CTV had been talking to said that she no longer wanted to participate in the story, CTV doubled down and pressured her. They sent Lisa LaFlamme after her, pressuring the woman to go on the record in a recorded interview. Now, it's my understanding that this woman, who was out of the country at the time while all this was going down, ended up being afraid to even return to Canada as a result of CTV's actions. But Canadaland didn't find that interesting. Instead, they just chose to republish nonsense that even CTV, in their lawsuit reply, acknowledged weren't publishable. So that's Jesse fail number 1. On to item number 2. June 27th, when novelist Stephen Galloway, fired following false accusations at the University of British Columbia, finally spoke out after 2 years of silence, and the full story of that disaster was published in Quillette, an 11,000-word article written by Brad Cran. Jesse Brown made a fool of himself, saying that the article was full of factual errors and didn't pass for actual journalism. As a fun note, even Jesse Brown's Wikipedia page doesn't meet standards. I'm thinking it's the word journalist after his name that's causing the problem. Then, Brown engaged in a podcast about the article written by Cran in which they make it clear that they didn't actually read the article. And they seem to think that the founder of Quillette, Claire Lehman, is a man. Amusingly, this podcast claims that they read Cran's article so that you don't have to. But the most bizarre losing tactic to discredit this excellent investigative report was to demand that writer Brad Cran provide his source material to Jesse Brown in order to check its veracity. Jesse's argument goes like this. Jesse has a partial report from the UBC investigation involved. Brad Cran has the full report. So Jesse claims the only way for the public to know if the full report is real is to give it to Jesse Brown, the apparent truth king and checker of documents everywhere, so that he can compare it to his partial, incomplete report. Now, unsurprisingly, CBC, that's Canada's publicly funded broadcaster, CBC's Kate McKenna took Jessie Brown's side of this argument. Of course, she had to stop being a journalist for a whole moment in order to support him. Now, in internet time, this went on for an ice age. Unfortunately, unlike the dinosaurs, Jessie Brown did not become extinct. For a final stroke of genius, Jessie seems to have connected his good friend, Catherine Burrell, with Stephen Galloway's false accuser to help sell this woman's bogus art project to make more money. The theme is that Galloway's accuser, a woman who was getting married to her husband in Paris and Fiji, whilst claiming to be in a Stockholm Syndrome type servitude to Mr. Galloway, with whom she was having an affair. Right. So this victim, who was found to be fabricating her allegations by the esteemed former judge Mary Ellen Boyd, is now continuing her fake victim narrative by doing victim art in a New York gallery. At what point does the Me Too movement want to separate themselves from false accusers? Well, Jessie Brown and his good friend Catherine Burrell have no concerns there, because like attracts like. So Catherine Burrell, she's the one who made a dramatic speech on the courthouse steps after falsely accusing Jian Ghomeshi, that's a former Canadian broadcaster who was publicly shamed, and his name has now been turned into an equivalent of sexual assault despite his being acquitted in a court of law. Well, all of the behavior that Burrell attributed to Ghomeshi, she admitted to herself that she initiated this behavior in the workplace. In fact, Catherine Burrell and Jessie Brown had a hearty laugh a few years ago about how Catherine Burrell used to make fist-fucking jokes in boardroom meetings and how she sexualized the otherwise stale environment at the CBC. I did a video on that in the past. But of course, we're in the post-truth era now, so who cares? Finally, item number 3. On July 16th, when former Globe journalist Leah McLaren published an astonishingly well-written article in Toronto Life about the Albert Schultz accusations, this is founder of a theater company called Soul Pepper, which was almost completely obliterated at the beginning of 2018, well, Brown criticized Leah McLaren for throwing shade on the CBC and their reportage. You know, kind of like a media watchdog should be doing. Now, I say astonishingly well written because I actively loathe Leah McLaren, but wow, this was a really well written article. McLaren and Jessie Brown, incidentally, have known each other for a very long time. According to a podcast on Canada Land, McLaren is best friends with Jessie's sister, and she knows quite a bit about him and his shenanigans. But ideology has blinded Jessie, and Leah's article doesn't have the message that Jessie wants, so he set about finding any problem he can with a word or a sentence, and then claims that her entire article has now fallen apart. In this case, Leah McLaren said that the CBC, in a rare move, admitted to putting a team together to find Canada's version of Harvey Weinstein, and Schultz became the biggest target. When Jessie demanded proof, that's what Julian Schur of the Fifth Estate actually said, McLaren, the good Samaritan that she is, provided a transcript of that part of her interview. But alas, the proof of good journalism wasn't enough for Jessie Brown, because the truth is too inconvenient for the good of his audience. So basically, Jessie Brown's argument here goes, Leah, I've lost my ability to read, so I'm going to ask my audience if they can understand what you said, and have them explain it to me. Now, I'm having a lot of fun showing you what an idiot Jessie Brown is, but at a time when people's lives are being destroyed overnight by stories recklessly published in mainstream media, and we need a media watchdog more than ever, it seems that Jessie Brown's boat is sinking. And his audience knows it. He's gone down thousands in his Patreon support in a rather short time. But he's not taking the hint. Instead of being a media watchdog, like he proposed, Jessie is intent on printing stories without any concern for the truth. So in a boat full of smug wokeness, where everyone should consider bailing, instead, we find out that Jessie and his crew think that they can stop the leak by hashtag believing the boat is perfectly fine. And meanwhile, Catherine Burrell is still pretending that she's a victim instead of celebrating that all the evidence against her didn't get exposed in court. Have that drink, Catherine. You and I know the truth, and so does Jesse Brown. He just doesn't care about the truth, if he ever did. But I do.